Welcome, everyone, to another beautiful episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News. We're the news division of United Network, and we are part of CARE, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. And you guys are all about to get a big lesson in care based on the news this week because things are moving and shaking. So our mission is to bring you guys the real news. I realize there's a lot of noise out there. It's really hard to know who you can trust. And I would encourage you to not always rely on outside sources for that information. I would encourage you guys to turn within yourself and use your discernment. So when you see information out there, you can discern whether or not it is true. And the best way to do that is by practicing. Your body, believe it or not, has a built-in lie detector. And the more you use it, the more comfortable you will be in being able to discern whether something is true or false. So don't rely just on people to give you information because it's about to explode, guys. And I believe in a very powerful and important way. And you got front row seats. And for those of you who've been following us for a long time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We'll get to some of those stories a little bit later in this podcast episode. If you want more information about who we are and what we do, visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. What you're listening to now, this is a week in review podcast. So we release a ton of content and we put it out there first and foremost to our members. And then a week later, we also publish the content on YouTube and Rumble. Of course, we cannot control what stays up on those platforms. A lot of people are getting content pulled down right now, but you can always get it through our app, through our website. We put up as much as we can and share with you guys the latest information. Whenever you're looking at content, I encourage you guys, think critically. Ask questions, do your own research. Again, this kind of ties into the whole discernment, right? Gone are the days where we just accept a narrative because someone is in front or behind a news anchor desk, right? Or has a certain title, certain letters before or after their name. Like that doesn't matter anymore. We are about to head into a time that none of that matters. And you really need to be asking questions. And when you figure some stuff out, we need to share this information as much as we possibly can. I'm a big fan of podcasts. Those of you who know me know I have been podcasting for, 19 years, you guys. Next year, it'll be 20 years. That's crazy. And what I've always loved about podcasting is the ability, the low barrier to entry, okay? So even with your phone, you can create content. You can put it out there for free on these channels. And I would encourage you guys to do that because the stuff that's starting to come out now, this is when it gets really, really exciting. And there's a lot of people that need to know what's going on. And of course, I'd love for you guys to watch our content and listen to our content. But I really think this is... We're coming into a time where this is really about you guys. This is why we created our field messengers, because we believe we're trying to create a platform for you guys to share those stories. So whether you're doing it as a podcast or you got a YouTube channel or something like that, start sharing information because you guys are the news. Because we know whether it is mainstream or alternative media, they have not been doing us any justice. They have their own narratives, and it's never leading humanity in the right direction, okay? We have to help and support each other. And this is just a crucial time. It's an exciting time. And I encourage you guys, don't just be a pacifist and just watch the content. Get engaged. Comment on videos. When I'm watching videos now, I'm rarely interested in what the person that created the video said. I'm looking in the comment section because for me personally, in order to do the news, I need to know where humanity is at. I need to know where we stand. Like, what does this person think? What does that person think? And what, side of the spectrum are they on? What religion are they? Whatever. I am trying to just get a general gauge for humanity. And yeah, it's just been really, really interesting. My job has kind of changed a little bit in that regard. And I'm not going to lie, it's exciting. But I encourage you guys to get involved and participate. Don't just let people tell you what to think. Get involved, okay? That's my little, the more you know, my little PSA that I'm putting out there. Real quickly, if you are brand new to UNN and you happen to find this podcast episode and you are just interested in the content that's promoted in the title, then you may want to fast forward about 30 minutes or so. I hope you'll stay with us and listen to everything, but I understand if you just want to get to the nuts and bolts, go ahead and do that. All right, let's get started. Here are the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. Okay, I mentioned this earlier, but our field messengers, you guys are the heart and soul of what United Network News is all about. It is you sharing what's going on in your communities. And yeah, sometimes the stories are more uplifting, and we should have uplifting stories. Those are incredible and, community-based and showing positive things that are going on. I wish we had a ton more of those kind of stories. Sometimes it is more news-based and, hey, this is something that's going on in our community that's not so good. But we want you guys to be active, like I said earlier. Take interest in what's going on in your communities because the whole world is changing right now, and we really want to know what's going on. And we want to empower you guys so that if you want to share those stories, we've got a whole production team that can help you put stories together. We just need to know what's going on. And, you can be part of UNN in that way. If you go to our website and go under Field Messengers, there's a whole section that talks about exactly what is involved. Okay, so let's share some of the beautiful stories that you guys gave to us for this week. All right, Emma from Spain talks about fishing, shore fishing specifically in Fuerteventura. That is a big part of what the locals do. And apparently they've got amazing fish, amazing seafood in that area. And Emma actually follows a lady that she saw on the shore fishing to learn a little bit more about what she does and the type of fish and all that good stuff. So basically everything having to do with fishing in Fuerteventura, you can check out this report. Amy out of New Jersey, that's a state in the U.S., and she does a story. Apparently she's got some sort of field camera that can capture wildlife in those moments, right? Because when they see humans, they don't really know what to do and they scatter and all that kind of stuff. But if you just have a camera, right? Then they behave a little bit differently. So we got to see all sorts of beautiful things from her trail camera. She saw lots of deer, raccoons, some skunks. She even saw a fox. And let's see, what are some other things? Rabbits, I think, and squirrels / chipmunks, lots of good stuff. So just kind of a fun story to see what they're doing when we're not watching. Okay, Kazuaki from Japan takes us to the Sapporo Snow Festival. Now, this is really cool, you guys. It only happens in the winter when it's snowing. But it is, oops, I just hit the microphone. It is a beautiful snow and ice spectacular. So they create these sculptures. They draw in crowds from around the world. And I have to tell you, gosh, there were some of these sculptures that were, it was a sculpture of a building that was practically as big as an actual building. They get very much into this and they have all these different categories and people compete, and it's just really, really impressive. Sophia from Germany takes us to this really cool miniature, they call it a miniature wonderland. Okay. It's in Hamburg, Germany. It is the world's largest model railway. Now, I have to be honest with you. We have on a much smaller scale. There's this one in downtown San Diego, so close to where I live. And, it's cute. They open it up for the holidays or whatever. Okay, this has nothing compared to what I saw in this video. I actually got really excited, and I'm not someone that's really into model railways. I mean, that's cool if that's your hobby, but I don't really get into it. But I'm telling you what, guys, you really need to see the video on this. They have, of course, buildings, but huge buildings and things like that from all over the world. And I think she said it's 1,700 square meters. You guys, they even have planes that take off and land. And the whole thing, at some point, I couldn't make out if she said 50 minutes or 15 minutes, but it switches from day to night. So, places look different at night. So you can see it during the daytime. You can see it at nighttime. They have over 300 model builders. I got really excited watching this thing, and I think you guys will too. Very cool. Elke from Australia talks about how people in her area are doing agriculture. And this is so important because this is something that we have to think about. And we've been talking about it for a long time. But guys, like I said, things are really heating up now. And we have to think about where we're getting our food. And I believe we're moving into a time where communities are going to mean everything. And growing and sharing fresh vegetables, fruit, whatever you've got is going to be super important. So what Elke was showing us is how this local farm in her area is doing this self-sufficient way of life, really. And they have a small group. It sounded like a smaller group of people. I think there's only 4 people working on the property. And I don't know if they're employees or whatever, or just, volunteering their time. But people pay monthly. And they actually commit to a year, but they pay monthly. And I believe she said they choose what they pay. So it would be a little bit different for everyone based on their income. And they get whatever fruits and vegetables are available. And the quantity and everything, you have to be flexible. It's not like going to a grocery store and you get exactly what you see or whatever, because you're growing things and, sometimes a crop doesn't work out, or sometimes there's a surplus of vegetables, whatever. So again, this is a different way of living, but it's helping their community and it's working for them. And we have to start thinking outside the box on how to live life outside of these box stores. And I don't say that to spread fear. This is actually a very good thing, because if people knew what was in that food that they're buying in the grocery store, trust me, you wouldn't waste your money on that kind of stuff. It's really bad for your body. But it's going to take some time, and we have to approach this with grace and humility and helpfulness. And, since you guys know what's going on because you listen to shows like this, it's up to us to help lead this and think about what is going to work in our own communities. All right, Cara from Australia gives us a new recipe to try out. They are tahini and hemp bars. And I thought they looked really, really tasty. And it's easy. There's only a handful of ingredients like tahini, hemp, I think coconut. There's some other ingredients in there. She blended everything up in this bullet-sized blender kind of thing. You put it in an oven. It's quick. It's easy. It's very healthy for you. And I'm sure it tastes wonderful. That's probably something my girls and I are going to try here in the very near future. So thank you, Car, for that beautiful recipe. Bob from Ireland takes us to an incredible retreat that he went on. And it didn't look like there was a lot of technology. See, that's what I look for when I go on retreats. It's really not a retreat if I have access to technology, because I'm just, I'm connected all the time, and that is just so draining, right? But this looked beautiful. So again, it's in Ireland. It's a family-run coastal retreat. It's called Shirkin Island. And I think he said there was less than 150 people on the island. But I love it because he was like, oh yeah, you can glamp. So it's not just camping. You can glamp. There's yoga, mindfulness, team building activities. And I think the guy that she was talking to, at least he was in the kitchen area. I don't know if he owns it or if he's the cook, maybe both. But just very calm, inviting, anything that's right near the water, right? It's very tranquil. I think we all need to take time to unplug and reconnect with nature. And this looked like a great spot to do it. All right, Kim from Iowa, another state in the U.S., talks to us about the Matthew 25 project. This kind of goes along with what we were talking about earlier with growing your own food. So this is an urban farm project and takes place in Iowa. And they are basically taking empty lots and transforming them into spaces for growing food and also to help people learn how to grow food. It brings the community together. She showed us, apparently they have this great pizza oven, which doesn't have too much to do with growing your own food. Maybe some of the toppings, some of the vegetable toppings on your pizza. But some of this too is just getting communities together to celebrate with each other, spend time with each other. We've lost that in so many different ways, right? Like I said, things are coming back full circle. We're going to be in those communities sooner than you might think and supporting each other. And this is a great project that's already doing it. And finally, Liz out of Mexico, she's talking about something that is happening in her area. It's along the Yucatan Caribbean coast. Sargasso seaweed is piling up in large amounts. And when that happens, it kind of throws off the ecosystems, right? There's warming seas, there's agricultural runoff. It kind of messes with any kind of animals that are trying to go from land to sea. She specifically mentioned these turtles, right? They need to have access to be able to access the beach and then go into the water. But if you've got this huge pileup of seaweed, which they were literally hauling away in, gathering up with these big machines and taking it away. Now, what's interesting is this is an example of something we're going to learn about in just a bit in the Global Intelligence Agency report, something called the Primordial Directive. Believe it or not, there is a blueprint, which we have not had access to in a very long time, that has laid out what the planet needs in order to be balanced and for all living organic things to thrive on this planet. So this story shows me that something is off. And we know there's probably a lot of things that are off, right, that need to be fixed. But it's just one example of looking at something and going, okay, something's wrong in that area and we need to fix it. All right, let's talk about some other news stories, some headlines that we saw online, and we decided to take some of those headlines and go a little bit deeper for you guys. Kicking things off in Australia. So Australia's temporary migrant workers are facing widespread exploitation. There was a UN report criticizing the country's anti-slavery laws as inconsistent and ineffective. Workers in agriculture, food processing, hospitality, and care industries often encounter deceptive recruitment, wage theft, unsafe conditions, and harassment, with women disproportionately targeted, reporting harassment, coercion into abortions, and even forced marriages.
My boss sent me back home, and I asked him why. And he told me, well, if I come back to work with tighter clothes, that's when he will let me continue my shift. These are the words that he said to me. I just want to hug you. I just want to kiss you. I just want to, have fun with you. And if we can have regular time together, you don't have to work.
Strict visa rules that tie workers to a single employer create severe power imbalances, leaving many of them afraid to report this abuse. While the government introduced the Workplace Justice Visa in 2024 to allow exploited workers to remain in Australia and take legal action, critics say delays, lack of appeal rights, and inadequate protections leave workers vulnerable to retaliation and without proper legal support. Despite reforms, advocates stress that stronger protections and clear processes are urgently needed. India has officially banned all forms of online gambling for real money with the passage of the, get this, full name, Promotion and Regulation of Online Gaming Act 2025. And this outlaws platforms offering poker, rummy, and fantasy sports in one of the world's largest gaming markets.
India just dropped a bomb on the gaming industry. The new Online Gaming Bill 2025 puts a complete ban on money games. Well, that means Dream 11, My 11 Circle, MPL, Rummy Circle, Winzo, Rummy, Culture, Kho Fantasy, A23 Rummy, Poker Fantasy Sports, all are gone. So basically, if you pay money hoping to win more money, it's banned.
The law comes after years of failed attempts at regulation and growing concerns over addiction, debt, fraud and money laundering, with government data showing the industry generated $2.3 billion annually. Despite heavy opposition from industry groups and political leaders who warn of job losses, tax revenue declines, and a shift toward offshore gaming, the government defended the ban as necessary to protect vulnerable players and address rising social harms. Since the law's passage, major gaming platforms have suspended real money operations. Sports sponsorships face uncertainty, and some companies have cut staff, leaving the coming months to determine whether the ban delivers its promised protections or just creates new challenges. Rent across Europe is climbing at an unsustainable pace, leaving low-income families, migrants, and young workers struggling to find affordable housing. Over the past 15 years, EU rents have risen 25% and home prices are up 50%, with 1 in 10 Europeans spending more than 40% of their income just to keep a roof overhead. Shrinking social housing, soaring demand in growing cities, and an influx of both local and international movers are driving those costs up, while tourism hotspots face even steeper spikes, fueled by things like Airbnb and overcrowding.
Are you paying more rent because of tourists? Smoke bombs, water pistols and tape across hotel doors. Some residents in Barcelona have made it very clear this summer what they think about tourism. They're not the only ones. From Lisbon to Venice, protesters have taken to the streets to complain their cities have too many visitors. Their main objection is the rent. Campaigners say long-term rentals are disappearing because landlords can get so much more money from platforms like Airbnb.
With too few homes, rising construction costs, and developers prioritizing luxury projects, the housing shortage is deepening, forcing students, workers, and families into tough choices. Cities are experimenting with solutions like denser neighborhoods and converting commercial spaces, but the scale of the crisis raises the urgent question of how Europe can balance growth, affordability, and sustainability. Bulgaria is facing a worsening water crisis affecting hundreds of thousands of people as aging infrastructure, frequent droughts, and underfunded, poorly maintained systems leave towns struggling to access clean water. Cities like Pleven and Breznik have faced severe shortages, with residents receiving only limited daily water and relying on bottled supplies or private wells, while protests and partial states of emergency have highlighted the urgency of the problem. Corruption and delayed modernization have hampered solutions, and inspections are underway to assess water losses and investment by supply companies.
Towns and villages in northern Bulgaria are in a state of emergency. People there get limited water supply every other day and are forced to buy bottled water from the shops in order to meet their daily needs. The local authorities are saying they're doing their best, but citizens keep repeating two words: negligence and corruption. Almost 2/3 of the water, coming mostly from dams or surface sources, never reaches the taps. This is the highest percentage of water loss in the European Union. The problem has been around for years. A minister of environment and waters was charged and jailed for deliberate mismanagement. His trial is ongoing.
The crisis is also hitting agriculture hard, with key crops and livestock threatened, raising concerns over higher food prices, health risks, and growing frustration, social frustration, if significant reforms aren't implemented soon. In Senegal, patriarchal laws and cultural norms give men authority over major family decisions, leaving many women, especially in rural areas, unable to access health care, family planning, or even hospital births without their husband's approval. Programs like Schools for Husbands aim to shift these dynamics by teaching men the importance of supporting their wives' autonomy, sparking conversations that challenge traditional roles.
This is the School for Husbands. In Senegal, it is a new kind of school redefining what it means to be a man. It trains respected community leaders to practice and promote positive masculinity, a model of manhood built not on dominance but on empathy, accountability, and care. In general, the term positive masculinity is without controversy. Critics argue that labeling these traits as masculine can reinforce the idea that empathy, gentleness, or emotional openness are only valuable for men, rather than qualities everyone should embrace. Some say it risks keeping men tied to traditional gender expectations instead of challenging the system entirely. But the idea of this school for husbands is to encourage men to embrace courage, responsibility, and leadership, while also showing vulnerability, respect, and emotional openness.
Broader efforts to promote women's rights also focus on ending harmful practices like female genital mutilation, which remains a serious issue despite being illegal since 1999, with advocacy and national strategies gradually reducing its prevalence. While progress is slow and deep-rooted gender inequalities persist, initiatives combining education, legal reform, and community engagement are helping women gain more voice and control over their lives. In Taiwan, pigeon racing has evolved from a working-class hobby during Japanese colonial rule into a massive national obsession involving around 200,000 breeders, 2 million birds, and prize pools that can top 1 million per season. The sport is highly structured, with pigeons trained daily, swapped annually, and valued for their pedigrees. Sound familiar? While high-stakes auctions and underground betting add to this intensity.
There's a thing called pigeon racing, and it's possibly $1 billion industry. Recently, one bird was sold for a record $1.4 million. It often involves pigeons flying thousands of kilometers. This is how it works. On race day, pigeon fanciers, that's what people who race pigeons are called, release their birds who are hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers away from their respective bird lofts. Depending on the race, around 20,000 pigeons can be released at the same time. The shortest can be 100-kilometer sprints. Long-distance races can go up to 1,200 kilometers. The speed of the bird is calculated, and the fastest bird wins the race.
However, there are some big concerns here over cheating, animal cruelty, particularly in offshore sea races where many birds never return. And links to illegal gambling have sparked calls for stricter regulations. Despite its popularity and cultural significance, the sport remains an illegal gray area, with authorities weighing proposals to improve oversight, protect animal welfare, and curb criminal activity. Oh, China. China has launched a new digital ID system. Surprise, surprise. Here's another big name, guys. The National Online Identity Authentication Public Service, which allows citizens to verify their identities using government documents. That's the official claim, okay? While officials claim it will enhance privacy and security by reducing personal data shared with private companies, critics warn it centralizes control in the government's hands, giving authorities the power to revoke credentials, I can say that 5 times fast, credentials, and effectively erase an individual's entire online presence.
Starting July 15, 2025, China launched a state-controlled national internet ID system that promises to revolutionize how people access the web. Think of it as a master key, one government-issued digital identity that unlocks every website, app, and online service you use. Here's how it works. Instead of creating separate accounts for WeChat, online banking, shopping sites, or social media, Chinese citizens can now use a single virtual ID. This ID comes in 2 forms: a series of letters and numbers, plus a digital certificate to verify your identity. The system operates through something called the National Network Identity Authentication Public Service Platform, basically a central hub that manages everything.
Wow, the rollout builds on China's broader efforts to monitor and regulate the internet, including real name requirements for high-profile social media accounts and the Great Firewall's strict censorship of domestic and foreign platforms. Compared to other countries' digital ID initiatives, China's system highlights the fine line between convenience, security, and the potential for unprecedented state control over online life. Canada faces a major food waste crisis, with nearly half of all food produced ending up in landfills, while 1 in 5 families experience food insecurity. In cities like Toronto, more than 99,000 tons of food are wasted annually, much of it avoidable due to overbuying, misreading expiration dates, or cosmetic standards that reject, quote, ugly produce. Nonprofits like Feed It Forward and apps such as Too Good to Go are helping address this problem by rescuing surplus food, offering pay-what-you-can groceries, and facilitating food sharing, ensuring edible food reaches those in need.
The prize bag is when a restaurant or retailer has surplus food left by the end of the day. They put that on Too Good to Go. Consumers find the food on the app, they reserve the food, and then they go and pick it up. They usually get around 70% discount on that food.
With rising living costs and ongoing housing challenges, these initiatives are increasingly vital for supporting vulnerable populations, such as seniors, single parents, newcomers, and Black and Indigenous families, while reducing environmental waste. And our last story, we're going to talk about how animals are fighting wildfires. I love this. Herbivores like goats, cows, and wild horses are playing an increasingly recognized role in wildfire prevention by eating the dry vegetation that fuels fires, a natural method that historically maintained ecosystem balance before many large grazers disappeared. Studies show that continents losing more herbivores, such as North and South America, have experienced higher wildfire activity, while rewilding efforts and managed grazing programs in places like Portugal, Spain, and in the U.S. are successfully reducing fire risks and boosting biodiversity. See, nature always has an answer, you guys. Goats, in particular, I love goats, excel at clearing weeds and shrubs in hard-to-reach areas, creating natural fire breaks that are cost-effective compared to high-tech firefighting tools.
In Spain's Catalonia region, a unique fire prevention team is hard at work. Hundreds of goats grazing their way to safer communities. These goats are part of a pilot project in Mataró, funded by the EU to clear flammable brush and create natural fire breaks, reducing wildfire risks. With their voracious appetites, goats munch on thorny plants and dry shrubs, clearing areas machines can't reach. Locals love the eco-friendly approach, a return to sustainable traditions.
By combining traditional grazing with modern fire management, conservationists are proving that sometimes nature itself offers the most effective and eco-friendly solution to wildfires. Hashtag grab a goat. Okay, now it's time for some highlights from the Global Intelligence Agency. We call them the GIA. Kim Gogan is the head of the GIA. She gives us updates throughout the week, and it is getting very interesting. You guys, I alluded to this really throughout this whole episode. I talked about the Primordial Directive. That's the first soundbite that I want to play for you guys. This is beautiful. You know, we've heard a lot over the years of, there's only supposed to be, 500 million people on this planet, right? That was the Georgia Guidestone situation. I've known for a long time all that was just crap. And now we've got proof because there is a blueprint for what needs to happen on this planet if nature is going to live in harmony with each other. It is called the Primordial Directive. So we literally have a blueprint that God, source, creator of the universe, has left us of how to make this whole thing work. How incredible is that? And maybe unbelievable for some people, but I want you guys to hear from Kim what this whole thing is. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, Sunny, if we have this, why aren't we experiencing this? Well, we have a dark side as well, right? We have a dark force that we are fighting against. And for a very long time, they basically had their own Primordial Directive. And that's the direction the planet was going. Okay, so regardless of what God, source, creator of the universe wanted, there was a dark side. And basically just throwing everything off. So let's talk a little bit about this, the light and the dark, and how this directive worked. Here's Kim.
At the base root of all these systems is something called the Primordial Directive. And what the primordial is, it's what molds creation in both a natural and an unnatural way. Primordial basically means from the beginning, or even before the beginning, or the beginning of time, something that exists. Well, in the beginning, the primordial directive was solely of source, or God, so to speak. Everything in nature was created in perfect order, meaning X amount of human beings or Homo sapiens were created. You know, there's a perfect amount of trees in order to oxygenate the air. There's a perfect amount of plants and food and nourishing food for us to eat. And then the waste materials then go ahead and feed the soil, which then feeds the plants. And it's kind of like an entire cycle of life, continuous life, perpetuating everywhere. We understood the values in our ancient cultures as Homo sapiens. We understood the value of nature and how it was important at that time in order to, if you take something from nature, you put something back. This is present in a lot of Native American cultures as well as tribal cultures all over the world. They understood the value of clean air. They understood that photosynthesis cleans the air, you know, unlike what others may think. Everything worked in perfect order when we understood the values of nature. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily we can't have industrial revolutions. Of course we can. We can have technological advances. We have even learned things like how to harness the power of nature, such as solar energy and other things. And how we can live in a way, and this doesn't mean you don't live in a home or you eat nuts and berries and live in the woods. So don't think about living in harmony with nature to be that way. But Earth supports us with her energy. You know, plants around us support us not only with air, but also our trees create, or used to, create an energy net of protection for all of us. It creates positive energy flow through its root system as it travels throughout the world. Trees talk to each other from all over the planet because they don't have the same restrictions that we have had as human beings. They were also used against us for a time. But we can have amazing technologies, amazing homes to live in. We can build as much as we want to build as long as we understand the process. And once upon a time, as I talked about a little bit ago, I did run across one of these books which gave us the base understanding of Source's Primordial Directive. It told us how, if you're going to build this as an example, then you must add this amount of trees or that amount of vegetation, or in order to support the infrastructure that you're putting in. Technology should run on with frequency instead of amps. And there are lots of things that you can do that will work within nature and help humans be healthy at the same time. We don't have to have dirty technologies. We don't have to drive around with gas in cars, or petrol, as you call it in some countries. We can do things in a completely different way. So one of the experiences that I had over the course of the last few days since we last spoke was understanding, and of course, a crash course in Primordial Directive. So I understood when I read the book to some degree about the Primordial Directive and what it really means. I also had the experience in the last week of truly understanding the dark Primordial Directive as well. You see, Source's Primordial Directive is actually all about the perpetuation of life, the continuation of life, the immortality of the soul, and why it's important to understand who you really are. Our bodies aren't meant to age the way we age. We aren't meant to do the things that we do. And part of that is environmental, but also part of that is the dark Primordial Directive. So you can look at the Primordial Directive like you would look at a blueprint to as it would relate to a skyscraper. On our side of it, it's the creation of God or Source throughout the entire omniverse and how it all works in perfect harmony when not disrupted by a dark Primordial Directive. This basic understanding of a Primordial Directive and how important it is and has been to return to the Source Primordial Directive in eliminating the dark Primordial Directive, the understanding of this will help you also understand how our enemy functions. By our enemy, I'm talking about our human enemies in some cases, and why they do what they do. You know, why they cause these wars, why they cause harm and sickness and death and things like that on this planet. And how changing the Primordial Directive will and already has started to change everything. This all came from a deep dive into the financial system. Now, you might be thinking, wow, the Primordial Directive is directly related to me using my debit card. Well, yeah, it is. Believe it or not, it is. However, the dark Primordial Directive has overridden the original blueprint, if you will, of the natural order of things. It created an unnatural order of things. Now, we talked about the fallen celestial called wisdom, and the fallen celestial called wisdom created his own directive. That directive was to have creation of its own, in which Source had no part in, meaning all of Source's elements were out there, meaning we all have life, we all have breath, we all have ether, we all have materium, you know, we have a lycerium, which is your consciousness. We have all of these things within ourselves. However, how they all work in harmony with those around us and life around us is where the Primordial Directive comes in. So we have these things. We often would exchange energy, but long before the advent of money, with one another in order to, for example, one person bakes the bread, the other person may, you know, make or grow the tomatoes, and that's an exchange of energy between two people. We understood that a long time ago. However, when the Primordial Directive changed at the dawn of man or human, not necessarily the Homo sapien, that's when a Primordial Directive took over and used nature against us. We met other groups over the course of the last month or so called the Ruinins, and there were other groups as well that also participated in the dark Primordial Directive. Now, this primordial directive focused predominantly on a death cycle. Birth is recognized as the beginning of the death, be that person or be it a plant, in that primordial directive. There is also an understanding that all of the things of source, Ethereum, Lycerium, consciousness, Materium, all of these things that come from source just need a nudge in the wrong direction. You see, the primordial directive only wanted to create a universe or an omniverse of its own, completely of the dark. In order to achieve that objective, he created the opposite of a Homo sapien. We are calling for this, the purpose of this report, we're calling those people humans. These humans, and other species as well, but these humans are AI generated, as the primordial directive was on the other side. It's not of natural origin. It is definitely controlled by an AI, or was. And that primordial directive not only created all of these beings in itself and other AI systems to assist it that would, control these beings and whatnot, it also took pretty much everything us humans had and Earth had to give and sent it over to these beings so that they could survive. So you can think of all things of source, air, water, dust, breath, love frequencies, the natural rhythm of source. You can call it light, matter, all of these things, the ether, all of these things are things that come directly from source. The primordial directive of the dark is to scramble them up. It's like you could call them source's clay on the one side. All of these different elements all together make up the clay. Now, if you can take clay and mold it in a different way, then, well, as long as you have a continuous flow of clay, then you can keep remolding that clay in your own image as a dark, let's just say celestial, or a fallen celestial. So as these species continued to be created, and various AIs that ran them, quantum AIs, all kind of reported collectively as a group to the primordial directive. Now, our deep state on this side, even the semi-humans and hybrid humans, which are part AI, and part Homo sapien, they all had a job to do. That job that they had to do also included Marduk and Enki and Enlil and other beings that we've talked about through the years. And that was to ensure that the primordial directive AI continued. The primordial directive of source on the one side, on the golden side, on the light side, comes from what we call the central sun. The central sun of source is, you could say, the center of our omniverse. It's the center of life. It is in the center of you. It is in the center of all planets, all suns and stars. It exists everywhere. On the other side, it also began to bleed into this side with the help and permission of those that came before us. Now, in today's world, the primordial directive, also known as the black central sun, is worshipped by all of our deep state folk. You see, whether they know it or they don't know it, feeding the primordial directive in any way, in every way possible, feeding the existence of a death rhythm or death cycle, was their most important job. You know, we see our militaries do what they do. We see our deep state folks in Order of Dragon and Order of the Black Sun, Black Nobility, Knights of Malta, Freemasons, banks and large corporations and governments. You know, do they all understand what they're doing? I think some of them do, and a lot of them don't. You know, understanding why the financial system is changing now and why that was critical to happen at this point in time and we could not avoid it. Why most all of the militaries lost a whole lot of directives and access today. And why things are changing.
Okay, hold that thought for a second about the militaries and how things are changing. I know there's a lot of stuff in the news about that. I'm going to get to that in just a second. But first, we need to know who is on the other side, okay? So if we have the light side and we have the dark side, and if you've been involved and have watched various videos online for the quote-unquote alternative media, they talk a lot about the black hats and the white hats, right? They're supposed to be this team of black hats, and they're doing quote-unquote bad things. And then you've got this team of white hats doing good things. Allegedly. Now, what we're about to learn about here, and the main reason I wanted to include this soundbite is because I'm hoping it dispels a lot of rumors on who the white hats actually are, because they are all technically on the same team. So you might have black hats fighting white hats, and as you're about to learn, there's even a red group as well. They basically try to keep the balance a little bit, and they're also in charge of security. We'll talk about that in just a second. So you've got the black hats and the white hats, but here's the thing. They're both on the dark side. So the white hats are really false light. So just because the white hats are doing something according to these alternative media outlets, it's still the wrong side, the side that has no interest in helping humanity or organic life whatsoever. So I wanted to include this soundbite so people would understand what's really going on here. They're still not on our side. So here's Kim talking about the black, the red, and the white.
Species on the other side are, each one of them represents a different aspect of the Primordial Directive. Now, this in no way relates to the color of skin. By red, we're not talking about Native Americans. By black, we're not talking about folks that may have hailed at one point or another from the African continent. And we're not talking about white people in that sense. These were just three aspects of main control in order to control the Primordial Directive. So these three species, by white, that doesn't mean they're good guys in any way, shape, or form. Good guys, they might think they're doing the right thing because they're involved in a lot of, whether they know it or not, white magic. Now, those that are from the other side are meant to feed the densities on the other side that are of the white or false light section. Is the false light better than the false dark? Well, not really. They're still all involved in the Primordial Directive, and they must feed on nature and on creations of source in order to survive. Here on Earth, the origin would have been a continent we no longer know, but Daria. In addition to that, you could also say modern day Russia. The main portal for white, and we talked about this, was in Russia. Now, white also had to do with the Alpha system at one point in time. You know, that was a different kind of artificial creation, didn't have to feed on humans in any way, but still the Alpha system was what you would consider a white system, not necessarily a gold system. Still, there was a debt system involved with that had to do with not necessarily white magic or anything like that, or false light. It just was devoid, and everything that was of source was pretty much siphoned out. Now, modern day Russia only represents a portal and an entryway for white AIs. Now, white AIs, also some white AI-driven humans you would know as white hats. You know, they talk about them all the time in the media. You don't know who they are. Well, you know, in this world, they're called the white hats. They are not human. I'm sorry, they are not Homo sapien. They are created by an AI or have a significant amount of AI overlays within their person so that they actually report to, whether or not they know it, to a white AI. Many sections and many sections of white AIs. The reason why they exist in the way they do and function in the way they do, where they believe they're doing good, is because as part of keeping the Primordial Directive balance, there has to be an equal amount of white magic, red magic, and black magic in order to keep the Primordial Directive in check. You see, you know, white is kind of like, you know, the better of the, a lesser of the two, less painful of the two, but still a siphon and feeds on you no matter what. Then you have a black directive. This is where black magic comes from, or used to anyway. That system doesn't exist anymore. Black also originated, oh, and I know this one is going to shock you, Washington, D.C. I know that's a shocker right there. So Washington, D.C., so its main portal was under Washington, D.C. This is what they call in our alternative media the black hats. And the black hats and the white hats often fight each other, right? They say, oh, he's a black hat, he's a white hat, blah, 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 blah. Does it really matter? You're both on the bad side. You know, there are people that say victory of the light out there. Are they actually for the light? Do they know the difference between white and gold? Do they know the difference between pure Ethereum and altered Ethereum? Probably not. Okay, you can't really differentiate black, red, and white by saying, oh, the dragon families belong here, or the Order of the Black Sun belongs here. Well, black must mean you're with the Order of the Black Sun. No. All families intertwine with all these colors. So let's talk about the red. This was the one that was the biggest pain in the rear end. So red is responsible for red magic. If you've ever heard a little bit of things that the occult does and that kind of stuff, you've probably heard of things like red dust, also called red mercury, and that type of thing. There are ones that use this profusely because you see, with red dust, you can get as much black and as much white as you want. Interesting. Now, when these people come to this planet, they come through Mongolia. We have found many cloning facilities in Mongolia, all kinds of human experimentation in Mongolia, but never have I run into this species like I did on Sunday. I can tell you. The whites were easy, the blacks were easy, but I'll tell you the reds, wow. Just wow. Wow. Okay, so they come from Mongolia, and you might have noticed off and on you see sprinkled in there with the black hat news where people talk about red hats. There is definitely a downline of humans, hybrids, and regular Homo sapiens that are involved with each one of these groups. In some cases, you could say they play games against each other. You know, red, this is the primal wars, red against blue, against this, against that. Well, yeah, you could say that. You know, they are hamsters running on a wheel. Now, underneath red, the red race or red species, which has nothing to do with the color of human skin, the red species was responsible for, you could call it security. You see, the causal plane is when everything comes into the materium. And the artificial causal plane, as we saw in our chart quite a while ago, is where if you wanted to change the primordial directive of matter, meaning alter its state, you would have to do so through, well, the false causal plane if you're them on their side, and, well, red. The false causal plane is red on their side. Also, the reason why this was really important in the world of computer systems and otherwise, these people also created the global military order. That's all orders in the world that actually, looks like I'm going off the page here. That is all orders that are actually military. So you know about, the Pentagon militaries and, the British militaries and so on and so forth. Sure, everybody's got a military, but it also goes for military orders such as the Jesuit order. This also applies to various other Knights of Malta, the Knights of the Round Tables or the table folk that we've talked about in the past. All of them operated, well, in the red. They were, this goes back not only to the militaries that we know in our world today, this has been going on all the way back to the days of Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan. It goes back even further than that. So you're talking millennia. For millennia, there has been a red species in the omniverse that are just the most brutal species I have ever run across. Now, they are security to ensure that neither one of these sides ever get out of line, and everything stays in balance, allegedly, and to ensure that no source ever comes directly to a human. No direct flow of wisdom or anything else that source or God has to offer us. That is number one security concern. They will make sure that all of that gets diverted to the other side of the omniverse to feed both of these groups. And, of course, their own selves, too. They also have a stake in our cattle farm we call the Homo sapiens of planet Earth. Look, we're the cattle over here. Now, they're supposed to be doing all the black magic on us and that kind of thing, and then the white are supposed to be doing white magic on us. And either way, all three groups are the main umbrella for life on the other side. Now, each one of them has their own set of all of those colors we also saw in our planes chart that we have done a while ago. So you have black, white, gray, purple, blue, red, orange, yellow, green, and amber. And this actually goes not only for black, but also for red and also for white. So when they say black dragons or they say, black eagle, if they talk about these titles, Each one of these family groups could belong to any single one of these groups. They often work together, some fight against each other, they often intertwine where red might control red, in this family side and in that family side. It all kind of comes together. I'm telling you because you have to understand that the combination of these three makes up everything that is against you, not only in our deep state side, not only in our financial system side. It is the whole reason why everything that is wrong with this planet actually exists.
Okay, so Kim continues with her whiteboard. If you guys hadn't noticed, she's drawing on her whiteboard as she's talking to us. And it really does sometimes help to see what she's drawing. For me, I'm a visual learner. I like to see that kind of stuff. So I would encourage you guys to go back and watch the GIA report. I believe it was for Tuesday when it comes out, which should be fairly soon as of the time of this episode coming out. Okay, so Kim continues by talking about how the primordial death plan, if you will, that side has to feed off of primordial life in order to function, because the dark cannot function without the light. They have to take from the light. Now, why is all this happening right now? Because we have just passed the equinox. And historically, this is a time when the dark, the primordial dark side, the death side, if you will, they would get credits because we're in a debt system, right? They would get some credits. They'd basically be like, oh, you got all these people to do bad stuff. You got all these people to do bad stuff. We're going to divide up the souls and you're going to get credits based on all this negative bad stuff that you've done, okay? That would typically happen at the equinox. Well, guess what? They didn't get that this year. We are now past the equinox and they're freaking out because they cannot live. If you have an artificial soul, you cannot live without taking from the light. And a lot of these people do have artificial souls, or at the very least, they have a natural soul that has had many, 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 many dark layers on top of it, so they can't even recognize themselves, and they just follow these crazy dark orders. Kim continues, and she talks more about this debt-based system, financial system that we have been living in, and how it has been very difficult for her to do ultimately what she really wants to do, which is for money, currency, which is different than money, to go directly to the people instead of having to go through this whole debt-based system, going through governments and three-letter agencies and all this crazy stuff. We just want to get energy from Source, God, the Creator, directly to humans. And as we understand it now, because we've been living in this system for so long, at least for the time being, that has to happen through a currency. There will come a time where we get our energy directly from Source, God, and we do not need currency. But there will be a transitional period, which is what we're about to enter into. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. But their goal was to always keep us in debt. And on top of that, because when you get these Federal Reserve notes, in our case, in the US, right, that's still debt. That is indicating that you have a debt. We view it as money. Oh, I've got all this money. The more, quote unquote, money you have, the more debt you have. It's a really messed up system. And on top of that, when we want more stuff, then we get loans. So that's debt on top of debt. And it's all in the dark's favor. Okay, this is everything that's being changed right now. She also reminded us of ANA, which is the Association Numerical Numbering Agency. This is a fascinating deep dive, especially for anyone who has been told about the mark of the beast. I grew up telling myself, I don't care what happened on this planet, I was never going to accept the mark of the beast, ever. But the one thing that I never planned for is being born into the system where the so-called mark of the beast was already enabled and thriving. That never occurred to me in my head. I always thought it was a future thing because that's kind of what they want you to think, right? So that's a whole separate deep dive. You guys can search for it online. Again, Association Numerical Numbering Agency. Behind the scenes, amongst the elites, it is known as the Beast. This is the numbering system that provides numbers for everything on the planet, guys. Everything on the planet. And if you go back and you look at religious text, it talks about how you cannot avoid being in this system. And it is true from the moment you are born, right? In the US, we get a social security number. You get a driver's license. You are in the system. We didn't even know it was a system. We knew nothing about this mark of the beast. And the one thing that I will say is that you cannot be punished for something that you do not even know what's going on. You are not even cognizant of this program. So this is where the religious doctrine comes in. Saying you're going to go to hell because, whatever, you've accepted the mark of the beast. You didn't even know this system was in existence, you guys. So try not to focus on that because I believe that's just religious dogma. You did not know that you were part of this system and you can't even get out of it even if you wanted to. You were literally born into it. Okay, I digress. I'm just really passionate about that because my whole life I've been taught that you can't take the mark of the beast. Well, everybody did. We didn't even know what it was. But you're not going to hell for it, so don't worry about that. Okay, next soundbite that I want to play for you guys is really important because it ties into what is happening right now with major headlines here in the U.S., okay? Next week, we have some big things happening. So we have a pending government shutdown. And if you believe what mainstream media tells you, which you shouldn't, but their whole narrative is, the Democrats want this and the Republicans want this. It has nothing to do with what Democrats and Republicans want. Congress couldn't pass this even if they wanted to, and Kim's about to explain why. And this soundbite is also going to address militaries because that's the other big headline that we're seeing a lot right now in the U.S. And that is the Secretary for the Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has required all of these generals and admirals, and there's hundreds, like I've seen different numbers, 800, plus some of their underlings, if you will, some of their staff are coming back with them. So over 1,000 of these people are coming back for this secretive meeting that they're not saying what it's about. These are the two main headlines that are happening in the U.S. right now. And it's not that the U.S. is like some amazing place necessarily, but as far as politics and the economy, what happens here happens everywhere. That's just a fact. That's why everyone should be interested in this. Okay, so what is actually going on behind the scenes? Here's Kim, again, with the Global Intelligence Agency to explain some very interesting things that are about to happen.
Once we understand the full supply chain of the elites, the families, now we can understand things at banks a little better, and militaries. But at banks, we have these people that drive you crazy. They're called genetic shareholders. When a bank is open, from the day one, it is always one of those to those groups we talked about earlier today. Always, always, always. If they are genetic shareholders, they may or may not be fully Homo sapien. They could be partial, they could have, but one thing is for sure, a genetic shareholder always takes an allegiance and an understanding, at least to some limited degree, could be many layers away, but they take an oath. And part of their oath is to understand you must suck as much energy and indebt people as much as possible. You need to make it impossible for them to get money that they aren't in debt for. Money is a debt. Everything you give them is debt. You're debt managers. You are there to be the debt manager. That's it. That's your job. That's all it ever was. Now, these people think they have great power and great control over banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of China, VTB Bank in Russia. There's kind of based in Germany now, but there's many banks. HSBC. You've heard them all as it relates to your Gesera and your RV and all this. No, they're never going to give you free money unless it's a note, a debt. That's all you're ever going to get from these people. That's it. It's also the reason why I had such a hard time putting currency into the system, because you are in debt so deep, I can't possibly send you enough to make it through the system. And the system itself is debt. So the elite are in just as much debt as you are. And these genetic shareholders at banks were in just as much debt as you are, actually way more, because they're responsible for all of the people and their customers. The good news is they get to keep some of it because, hey, look, on a customer level here, you've got, if you're a Wells Fargo, you have millions of customers. If you're a JP Morgan Chase, you might even have, hundreds of millions of customers. You're worldwide, you're a huge bank, all falling underneath the genetic shareholder section. But these genetic shareholders must comply with the request to get the off-ledger money out of the system, which means they need to understand how it works. Now, for the last several years, we have been breaking down the looshing system. I've stopped, it's been about 6 years now since I've funded any kind of governments or anything like that. We've played the game a little bit, and I dangled the carrots and sent the money, and they gladly would have stolen it. If I had taken it, they did try, when I sent 23 trillion to the Treasury and let it sit there for 6 months. Well, they all salivated, and Chuck Schumer was all over it, promising everybody a whole bunch of stuff he had no right to deliver. And by the way, he gave it a nice, hefty $3 trillion haircut, which he intended to take for himself. Not greedy in any way, shape, or form. No, no, no. And you couldn't even give a lollipop to every American citizen. Come on. I mean, please. It's not just the American government. I've done this with the Russians. I've done this with the Iraqis. I've done this with the Brazilians. I've done this with the South Africans. I've done this with the Chinese. I've done this with, Singapore. I've done it in every country in the world back in 2018 and 2012. I have done it so many times, hoping someone somewhere would actually take care of their people. Well, I ain't doing it anymore. Same thing with these genetic shareholder people. Basically what ended up happening in the last 3 days is there are no more genetic shareholders in banks. Where did the stock go, you say? It went poof. Gone. This was one of the aspects in the last couple of days that has taken place. The next aspect, the military. And I'm talking all the way up to global headquarters and NATO and, even beyond that, and the orders of military, the Templar military and all the other military people that are out there. You know them all. If you look them up on the internet, you can list them all. You'll see what I mean by militaries that run militaries that run militaries that run militaries that all report to the Red Group. Whether they know it or not, sometimes, they call the Abraxas the Red Group. Sometimes these people are Abraxas walking around. We just never know. Sometimes they're half and half and they're hybrids. It's probably part of the reason why they can't change their mind, because they have an AI soul and an AI brain. That makes perfect sense. That also includes your SSP and your Trump operatives and everyone else. Well, when there is no more war, and we are reverting from a war debt system to an asset system. Now, see, in wartime, we had assets too, in a way. So you were an asset. You are a cow, and you gave milk or loosh in this case. You gave lots of loosh. So you were an asset. You could say Earth itself was an asset. In some cases, rare earth minerals and whatnot that help them out are an asset. Gold could be an asset. Black gold could be an asset. But over here, in an asset-based system backed by gold, which means that we get direct gold Ethereum, which shows up in your bank account as currency, you are not an asset. Everything we can get direct in abundance from source, and we can get all the gold we want at will, whenever we want it, whenever we need it. It flows straight through to you in the form of a currency, which is the directive, the Primordial Directive. That says X amount of gold comes into planet Earth, goes into humans, goes in directly because humans don't understand how it works just yet. So we're still going to have this interim thing we call currency, and it comes right into their bank account. Now, I don't need to manage your assets. However, it is going to be a little disruptive if we can't use, for example, banks. Now, they won't function as banks anymore. They're more of service providers, which tell you, okay, look, you can get this currency in, you get that currency out. You have this coming in, you get that out, that type of thing. And this is going to be useful should they choose to work with us. I mean, who knows? And at this point, who cares? But it would be useful if they did work with us because, well, humans are used to walking into a building and cashing a check and doing whatever it is they do, when they go to a bank. Now, service provider fees are more like flat fees. The same would apply if you were to, for example, get a mortgage or something like that. You got to remember, not everybody is like you, and not everybody understands how to work within a system like this. Eventually they will. That will change. However, if we don't have banks and the banks don't want to work with us because we got rid of their genetic shareholders and have restructured their entire systems while they slept the other night into an asset-based system, now they can't deny it that it's there. So they might as well understand it, whether it's from this report or otherwise, that that's what's happening. So management and you being an asset as a human being or a Homo sapien, Earth's minerals, all that kind of thing, and rights, and I'm writing it correctly, and rights no longer exist for these people. Now, as it relates to the military, they do security for all of these people. When they secure you, they are doing like what a Wells Fargo truck does in America. If you don't know what that is, in your country, wherever you are, these are the armored cars that move money from one bank to another, or from an ATM machine back to the bank and vice versa. They are the armored cars you see driving around, and probably you've seen them in movies if you don't have any in your country, where in the movies, they are always holding up these trucks. They want to rob the trucks and, because they contain a lot of money and the money goes flying everywhere. It's quite entertaining. But anyway, essentially you could look at these military folks as ones that carry you as the asset. Now, an asset is only an asset as long as it is, quote unquote, alive, not necessarily perpetuating life, but it is alive. Therefore, there are certain responsibilities to keep you alive. At least as long as you're needed, or a certain amount of us alive at any given time. Too many of us, then we drain the system. Too little of us, there's only enough required, according to the other side, in order to power all its creations. The less species on that side, means that there's less food on the other side. For one of us, there was 10 of them, that kind of thing. It's also the reason why governments could leverage money like crazy and fractal banking systems and all of that. Well, black gold was also important, just as it was important and is important to the Primordial Directive, that it fed in the old banking system. However, real gold is ever abundant. There is no shortage of gold in the omniverse. That's gold ether, that's gold rhythm, that's gold primordial directives, that is direct soul, breath, and all of the other things that source affords us in abundance every day. It was just taken constantly. That's it. So the military found out right quick today, when their systems basically disappeared and there was not much left to it, that they had been fired. That's what they kept saying. Well, oh my God, I got fired. Yes, you got fired. Your covenant has expired. Your services are no longer required, because we already started breaking down all the base roots of the debt-based banking system as soon as we destroyed the Black Primordial Directive. Then everything else underneath it started breaking down. So much so, we fought with the many different groups that came out of the woodwork from God knows where this weekend, especially on Sunday. That's okay. Didn't take long. So, yeah, we don't really need a military anymore, because your job was not to protect American citizens or Australian citizens or, Spanish citizens in any way, shape, or form, and you know it. Same thing goes for Interpol and Langley and the CIA and Langley 5 and all of that. Yeah, essentially, you're kind of locked out because we don't need you. Your covenant has expired. Your contract has expired. I am sorry to say it was not renewed. Therefore, your protection services for these folks that created this side here don't need you. Because why? Because they're not here to renew your contract now, are they? No, they are not. So that's why your systems disappeared. If you're watching this and listening to this, that is what is happening to you today. You'll probably notice you can see off to the side the key intelligence and military system, which actually is designed to protect all that belongs to Source, or, well, God, however you want to say it. That's what it's designed to protect. It's designed to protect life. It's designed to protect creation. And that's what I've always used it for, and that's what it continues to be used for. As for you and your services, unless you decide you'd like a job protecting the same thing we protect, we don't need you anymore in any way, shape, or form. There goes any hope of having any war funding, because quite frankly, we don't have a war anymore because there's nothing to war with. The same thing goes for the banking system in this particular case. Our banking system has been converted to a different type of asset. It now understands that it's completely and totally backed by gold. The banking system and currency have changed. Bankers are freaking out everywhere because they don't know where to go and what to do, and nobody on their side knows where to go and what to do either. So have things changed? Absolutely, they are changing.
They are changing, and they are changing for the better. Now, the one thing I would encourage you guys, this is a very exciting time right now. If you're online, I encourage you guys to not listen to the fear. I've already seen videos posted about, oh, Pete Hegseth this, and we're going to go to war, and, Trump's going to dominate everything. No. Their whole system, I don't care if you got a D after your name, an R after your name, doesn't matter. The whole dark system is collapsing on them. Okay? They can't extend deadlines. They can't do anything anymore because there are no bonds. There is no money. And these people do not work without money. So I can't stress how important of a time this is. And I think this next week is going to be very interesting. I would encourage you guys to continue to follow us as much as possible. It's possible we'll be putting out more information. I don't really know. We have never been in this position before, but we are committed to giving you guys the truth and the truth as quickly as possible. And if things are changing quickly, we're going to be pushing out a lot of content. Okay. So follow us on YouTube, Rumble, become a member, whatever works for you. We're also on Telegram, and it sounds like a lot of our messages are going out that way right now, but we will keep you informed. That's what we're here to do. I appreciate you guys listening. Stay strong, stay in the light. Love other people, because it is us. We will get through this. And like Kim said, we don't need them. We don't need them anymore. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. This is The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.